We have hit the position that I think if I were to take a poll, probably has most Dolphins fans nervous compared to any other position on the team. There are a couple other ones that you would give it a run for its money, maybe at linebacker, but offensive line likely has the most of us worried. And we've talked about this to quite some extent in the past. Mike McDaniel, Chris Greer have this love, this belief that Liam Eichenberg can get it done and that Austin Jackson can get it done. Because you ask us as fans, like, hey, what do we need to improve on heading into this offseason? Well, atop most of our list probably would have been, you know what, another veteran offensive lineman. Let's do like what we did last year. Let's bring in a guy like Connor Williams, a Terron Armstead. Let's shore this thing up, keep Tua healthy. What did we do? Not that. We didn't spend the big bucks on the Mike McGlincheys of the world. We went with the Dan Feeneys of the world and the Isaiah Wynns. And we're going to talk more about this, like I said, a very highly debated position as we enter these training camp battles. But before I start, what's your take? What's your thoughts on the offensive line? Who are we keeping? Who's on the outside looking in? Any thoughts you have as they pertain to the offensive line? Let's go ahead and hear them. As we've been doing, we're going to pull up the graphics as we talk about them, the projected starters, the guys that are more so kind of projected backups, and then those who are in that clear cut looking to compete for a backup role, compete for a roster spot in general. So if we look at the team's starting offensive line, kind of as today, as we get set to enter training camp, Terron Armstead solidified at left tackle. Robert Hunt solidified at right guard. And we thought we had a solidified center, but now Connor Williams, we'll see. Does the contract hold true into training camp? We'll see how that goes. We'll touch on that more here as we go through this video. But then you've got those question marks, and you've kind of got the guys that I label as penciled in. Liam Eichenberg, Austin Jackson. If we had a game tomorrow, those are your starting players at those positions. But if there's a battle to be had for a starting spot on this Dolphins offensive line, you know as well as I do that it's at those two positions. And I'm going to probably go in between a couple of these different graphics as we go here, because Connor Williams brings up a whole new set of circumstances for this Dolphins team. If you remember back to OTA's minicamp, well, who was getting some of those snaps for Connor Williams while he was holding out? It was Liam Eichenberg. Now that brings up a couple of things, because I'm going to move on to the next slide as well here. You look at these guys that are up here: Isaiah Wynn, Robert Jones, Kendall Lamb, Dan Feeney. Well, of those guys, who can play center? Well, it's Dan Feeney, so that gives him a little bit of a leg up in competition. But if you look back to Liam Eichenberg taking center snaps as well, maybe then that opens the door for a guy like, if Connor Williams hold out. I'm just doing some hypotheticals here. If Connor Williams continues to hold out, maybe you do get Liam Eichenberg taking the bulk of those snaps at center. Well, then you got Feeney that can compete at center and guard. Then you've got a guy like Robert Jones who's got experience as guard as well. So that's where, after all of these years, always having this issue with the offensive line, never just really entering the season with a solidified starting five, man, we have been just in this purgatory for what feels like forever now. Because, yeah, Terron Armstead is one of the top left tackles in this game when he's healthy. Robert Hunt, man, if that guy could get just a little bit more publicity, he'd be a Pro Bowl right guard in no time. And we thought we had that other solidified piece in Connor Williams. But that throws a whole new just set of circumstances into this because of who's going to have to get those reps at center. And what's that do to these backup guys? Because like I said, you got Dan Feeney who can compete at center and guard. You got Isaiah Wynn who's got experience at both guard and tackle. And when you first brought him in, you're like, you know what? Maybe that's competition for both Liam Eichenberg and Austin Jackson. While it might be, I truly think that Isaiah Wynn, if he's in the camp battle, it's for Liam Eichenberg's spot. He probably would have the best chance of unseating a guy like Liam Eichenberg when it comes to just projecting out that starting five. So I think that's where he slots in as well. Who else we got on this? Kendall Lamb ended up getting some run at tackle again last year as well. Another one of our offensive linemen that ended up getting hurt. But then as you go on through, I'll throw up the next graphic. So we've got a lot of guys that fit this role here. And you need, obviously, a lot of offensive linemen. I think the Dolphins kept, I should have double-checked that. I think they kept 8. They may have kept 9. I would think that they'll keep at least 8 again this year. Probably, potentially 9 as well, depending on how the Connor Williams thing shakes out. But then you got Obuehi, who got brought in as kind of a second, third wave free agents as well, who can potentially, I see him competing more so for that backup right tackle spot, that backup swing tackle spot. But then you got Christian, who got a little bit of run last year, another guy that was brought up late season, just needing bodies. Lester Cotton got some run. I believe he was the starter in the team's playoff game. Of all things, make your debut. Here you go, Lester Cotton. Why don't you jump in against the Bills in a wild card game? So we've got a couple of guys here that have experience. Obaway, he obviously has experience, hasn't lived up to that first round billing. Cotton threw him into a playoff game. Everything should be gravy for him, right? After getting thrown into a playoff game. But then you got a guy like Keon Smith, who's kind of platooned between the practice squad, active roster for a couple of years now. Then you got a couple of undrafted guys, and then the one guy that we drafted in Ryan Hayes. But I'm here to tell you one thing. Ryan Hayes is not guaranteed a spot on this roster by any means. He's a guy that had good experience at tackle during his time in Michigan. However, just the sheer length, the prototype size, he's likely going to get some run at guard in training camp. He'll get a chance to compete. But if I'm making a prediction today, he probably is on the outside looking in. Of this team starting, not starting, but just final 53-man roster. But if you look back at these starting guys, let's just say Connor Williams ends up kind of getting it together. I don't know where that stands right now, in all honesty. I know that the team wants him to be like, hey, guy, we are in win now mode. This is our chance to compete. Look at the roster that we've assembled. Look at what we have potentially going on with us right now, with an offensive mastermind in Mike McDaniel, with one of the most coveted defensive coordinators in Vic Fangio, with a quarterback still on his rookie deal, and just littered with playmakers. Just absolutely littered with speed and playmakers around the board. Now, if you want to make sure that this team doesn't come up short, we need you, because this team can't have the injuries that it had at offensive line last year by any stretch of the imagination. Now, if you're talking about a guy that's not even injured, but just holding out because he wants a new deal, hey, I get it. This is his chance to strike. Teams are already flirting around with other potential free agents, with guys like Dalvin Cook, other guys that could be getting some of the salary cap. And we got guys like Connor Williams and Zach Sealer and Raekwon Davis and Christian Wilkins, like, want my money too. But they're all in-house as of now anyways. Training camp hasn't officially started yet, but we're all expecting those guys to be there when training camp does. We cannot say the same for Connor Williams. So it's going to be an interesting run. Like I said, there are the battles at this position for my money. It's going to come down to, can a guy potentially scoop up a left guard spot? Can a guy potentially scoop up a right tackle spot? But outside of that, if the Dolphins and Mike McDaniel, Chris Greer are super true to Liam Eichenberg, Austin Jackson, well, then your biggest camp battles are going to be those guys that are fighting for those backup spot roles. And what happens with Connor Williams? Does the team need to keep another guy due to the Connor Williams situation? So there are a ton of question marks going into camp at the offensive line. But I'm curious to hear what you've got as well. Your thoughts on Connor Williams, your thoughts on left guard, right tackle, your thoughts on the guys that are maybe on the fringe, on the outside looking in. Let's go ahead, hear your thoughts in the comments as well. That is what they are there for. But that's what I've got for the offensive line, Dolphins fans. And until next time, fins up.